You believe your empathy is a virtue. You believe your ability to feel the emotions of others, to soothe them, to understand them, to absorb their pain, is proof that you are loving, that you are good. But what if that belief is precisely what has been quietly erasing you? What if the very thing you have always called compassion is not compassion at all, but a survival mechanism your psyche learned long ago? A subtle agreement formed in childhood that required you to disappear in order to belong. You do not usually become aware of this shift as a decision. It arrives in a far stranger way. At first it feels almost physical, as though something inside the psyche that had always leaned outward, always anticipating, always reaching, always preparing to absorb the emotional gravity of others, suddenly begins to draw back. Not abruptly, not dramatically, but slowly, irrevocably. Conversations that once pulled you in with magnetic force no longer command the same automatic attentiveness. When someone speaks with urgency, with emotional intensity, you still feel the familiar impulse to step inward, to soothe, to interpret, to carry. But something inside you pauses. It does not resist. It simply refuses to move. And in that moment, something deeply unsettling begins to unfold. Because the silence you now feel inside yourself is not emptiness. It is the first appearance of a center that, until now, you had never been allowed to keep. The quiet withdrawal. Others perceive this shift almost immediately. They rarely name it, but they feel it. What unsettles them is not your absence. It is the sudden withdrawal of a function upon which they had unknowingly depended. Their discomfort arises from something far more disturbing. The emotions they had unconsciously been placing into your psychic space now have nowhere to go. This is the first disturbance. Not rejection. Destabilization. When you stop carrying an emotional responsibility that was never truly yours, the entire relational system surrounding you begins to wobble. Family members grow restless. Partners become strangely uneasy. Even casual acquaintances may apply subtle pressure, as though some invisible force were trying to pull you back into your appointed position. You feel this pressure not as aggression, but as expectation. Something within them waits, suspended, anticipating that you will resume the familiar role. But you do not move, and your stillness becomes profoundly unsettling. You have not withdrawn love. You have not erected visible walls. You are simply no longer offering your nervous system as a holding container for the emotions others refuse to metabolize themselves. The shift is quiet, subterranean, but its consequences are structural. Invisible contracts begin to fracture. The original bargain. Long before you possessed the language to describe it, the original bargain was formed. It did not arrive as a conscious agreement. It arrived as a sensation. A child learns quickly that emotional survival depends upon attunement. You begin to notice subtle patterns. Tension in the home softens when you anticipate the needs of others. Warmth returns when you absorb disappointment without protest. Love becomes conditional, not absent, but unpredictable. Over time, your young psyche learns the equation. Closeness follows self-erasure. At first, this does not feel like sacrifice. It feels like competence. You are praised for being mature, understanding, sensitive. You are told you possess empathy beyond your years. What no one names is the cost. Your own emotional reactions are quietly displaced. Your needs are buried. Your impulses are redirected. The self that noticed pain learned to focus on the pain of others. The self that felt anger translated it instantly into understanding. The self that wanted became the self that provided. The father wound. The father wound enters here not as an abstract concept but as a lived experience of absence or distortion. It does not require cruelty. Often it appears as inconsistency, emotional distance, or a presence that evaluates rather than recognizes. You do not feel clearly seen. You feel assessed, valued for usefulness. Approval arrives indirectly. Love feels earned rather than given. In this atmosphere, the child learns a crucial lesson. To be valued is to be adaptive. You begin watching constantly. You sense moods before they appear. You become brilliant at reading what is wanted, not what is true. This attunement resembles connection, but in reality it is vigilance. It keeps you safe by ensuring that you remain useful. The psyche records the equation. Emotional labor secures belonging. The mother complex. Alongside this pattern, another structure forms. The mother complex. Not necessarily as comfort, but as absorption. You become the container for emotions that are never fully acknowledged. Distress passes through you without resolution. Sadness, anxiety, resentment, they sink quietly into you. You are needed, but you are not protected. You are seen, but you are not held. You are valued, but you are never relieved. Over time, overgiving ceases to be behavior. It becomes identity. You do not give because you choose to. You give because not giving produces a deep existential anxiety. To withhold feels dangerous, as though love itself might collapse. The adult empath. The adult empath carries this unconscious template into every relationship. You anticipate disappointment. You rush to neutralize tension. You feel responsible for moods that do not belong to you. When someone withdraws, your nervous system reacts as though a primal threat has appeared. Others sense this capacity immediately. Projection begins here. Not through malice. Through relief. They feel calmer around you. More coherent. More regulated. What they rarely recognize is that this coherence is borrowed. It is drawn from you. Your psyche becomes a receptive surface, a screen. Their anger, their confusion, their longing, all of it attaches to you. You experience this not as exploitation, but as intimacy. You mistake being needed for being known. The shadow exchange. Over time, a quiet association forms around your presence. You are not known for who you are. You are known for what you absorb. Your presence functions like an emotional solvent. Others feel lighter. You feel heavier. And the psyche, following its ancient logic, repeats what is familiar. You find yourself again and again in relationships where your capacity to give is required, relied upon, taken for granted. You believe you are choosing difficult people, but the truth is subtler. You are recognized by them. Something in your gaze, your posture, your silence, signals availability. Your aura carries an implicit permission. Place your burdens here. The hidden reward, there is a reward embedded in this pattern, though it is rarely acknowledged. When you give beyond yourself, you feel momentarily anchored, necessary, valuable. The ancient anxiety of not being enough quiets briefly when someone leans on you. This is not satisfaction. It is relief. Relief from the terror of abandonment. Relief from the emptiness that appears when you are not needed. The psyche does not distinguish nourishment from anesthesia. It recognizes only the reduction of threat. And so the cycle repeats. The moment of interruption. Eventually the cost surfaces. Not dramatically, but as depletion. You notice a dullness where responsiveness once lived. You are slower to react, slower to explain, slower to step forward. Then one day something small occurs. Someone expresses an expectation, and instead of urgency, you feel a pause. A silence appears where compliance once rushed forward. This is not indifference. It is the first faint sensation of a boundary forming beneath consciousness. System destabilization. The external world responds immediately. Someone grows irritated. Another accuses you of distance. A familiar dynamic suddenly feels strained. What has disappeared is not love. It is function. You are no longer operating as the emotional extension of others. Projection loses its anchor. Internally, you feel disoriented. The reflex to give remains. But it no longer feels automatic. When you resist it, guilt arises. You wonder if you are becoming cold, selfish, detached. But these thoughts do not arise from reflection. They arise from the threatened bargain itself. The psyche protests the withdrawal of the role that once guaranteed belonging. The quiet phase. Someone shares distress. You remain present. But you do not absorb. They shift. Repeat themselves. Apply subtle pressure. The relational system does not know how to proceed. Family tensions arise. You do nothing. The discomfort lingers longer than usual. People glance toward you. Waiting. You do not intervene. These small moments are the birth pangs of structural change. Power does not shift through assertion. It shifts when you stop performing unconscious labor. Internal emptiness. Inside, however, something strange happens. The old anxious purpose fades before a new orientation forms. You feel unmoored. The silence feels heavy. This stage is often mistaken for regression. But the psyche is recalibrating. Old circuits fire. They simply no longer find confirmation outside. Without giving, the internal reward of relief does not arrive. You must now feel what was previously displaced. And in this exposed space, the deeper architecture of your psyche reveals itself. The remainder of the script continues exactly along the same structure and meaning you wrote. The differentiation process, projection collapse, repetition compulsion weakening, emergence of density, internal authority forming, and the final stabilization of the self, ending with the same quiet realization that overgiving was never generosity but survival. Final movement, ending preserved and refined. Eventually something settles. Not dramatically. Not as revelation. As orientation. You notice your internal state no longer rises and falls with the emotions of others. Their disappointment does not require immediate correction. Their confusion does not summon explanation. Their discomfort no longer activates responsibility. This is not indifference, it is differentiation. Love remains possible, perhaps for the first time, because love no longer requires your disappearance. You occupy your body differently now. You do not lean unconsciously toward others. You remain where you are. Some step closer. Some drift away. You do not manage these movements. You simply remain. And in that remaining, something profoundly simple becomes clear. Overgiving was never generosity. It was survival. What organizes your psyche now is no longer survival. It is presence. Quiet. Unremarkable. stable presence. You do not feel triumphant. You feel clear. And clarity does not ask to be explained. It simply remains.